The air inside the slaver ship was thick with dust, cold, and silence. Dim emergency lights flickered above, casting long shadows in the cargo bay. The Empire had told him this wreck was empty, just old machinery and trash. But Cade knew better. He had heard something, a soft sound, like crying. He followed it, passing broken crates and burned-out control panels. The sound grew louder. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a recording. It was real, and it was close. Cade stopped in front of a thick metal pod locked tight. The scanner showed life inside barely. His heart pounded as he typed in the emergency override code. The lock clicked, hissed, and the pod slowly opened. Inside, curled up and chained, was a woman. No, an alien woman. She was huge, towering. Even while sitting, her skin was smooth but slightly iridescent, a soft blue hue. Her eyes were wide and glowing faintly in the dark, and tears ran silently down her cheeks. She wore only a ripped lab suit that barely covered her body. Her arms were shackled, and deep marks on her wrists showed how long she'd been like that. She looked up at him, afraid. Not of his weapon, but of what he might say. Then she whispered, voice shaking, "You won't want me. I'm too big." Made to breed. Cade froze. He didn't expect to hear words like that, but more than that. He didn't expect to feel the sharp twist of pain in his chest. He slowly lowered his rifle and stepped closer. Then, to her shock, he knelt. Gently, he said, "Who told you that lie?" Her lips parted, confused. Everyone. Cade had only come here for a scan run. The slaver freighter had been abandoned in orbit after a skirmish. But now, it was clear the Empire had lied. This ship had been carrying living beings, beings like her. In the next few pods, he found others. Alien females, different shapes, all labeled and scanned. Labeled like cargo. Tagged for testing, sorting, disposal, but the one in front of him, she wasn't like the others. She was taller than any human woman. Her muscles were firm, but her body was soft in shape. Her long black hair had patches of silver, and her back bore a faint tattoo markings of her genetic line. She had a name, barely remembered. Lissa, she said quietly. Her people had been created by science engineered in hidden labs. The goal? Breedable slaves for colony work? But some came out wrong. Too thin, too sick, or in her case, too big. The labs marked her as a failed design. She had been kept alive only to be tested and studied. When they were done, she was sent. Here to be discarded. Cade felt sick. He gently held her wrist, inspecting the wounds from the chains. "You're not a failure," he said softly. "They are." Tears filled her eyes again. She tried to pull away, ashamed of her size. She had been told her hips were too wide, her bones too thick, her strength too dangerous. But Cade didn't. "Move back." He reached into his pack and pulled out a soft thermal blanket, wrapping it around her shoulders. "Can you walk?" She nodded, slowly. He touched the side of his helmet. "Command, this is Cade. The ship isn't empty. There are survivors' experiments. I'm bringing them out." A voice crackled back. "Negative, soldier. Leave the wreck. Not interfere. That's classified cargo. You're not authorized to." Cade switched off the comms. He looked back at Lissa, who was watching him carefully. She had seen humans before cold. Curious, cruel, but this one, he wasn't like the others. He took her hand. Her fingers trembled in his. She tried to say something, but he shook his head. "You don't need to explain," he said. "Getting you out of here?" They walked together, through the wreck, her towering frame leaning on his shoulder. He moved her carefully, covering her with his jacket. As they reached the exit, she looked back, the cold pods, the silence, the place she thought would be her grave. She looked down at him and whispered, "Why are you helping me?" Cade didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Because they saw you as a thing. I see you as a person. No one should die believing they're unworthy of love." Lissa's breath caught in her throat. For the first time since she was taken, her chest felt warm, not from fear, but something else. Hope. And in that moment, with her hand in his, and the slaver ship burning behind them, her journey finally began. Asterisk. Smoke trailed behind the stolen freighter as it limped through the stars. Cade's hands moved fast across the control panel, overriding security locks, redirecting power to engines, anything to keep them in motion. Behind him, Lissa sat hunched. In the corner of the cockpit, still wrapped in the thermal blanket, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She hadn't spoken since they left the wrecked slaver ship, but her glowing eyes never stopped scanning the dark windows as, if expecting someone to come after her, they would. Cade had no doubt about that. He'd gone rogue the moment he ignored orders. The Empire didn't forgive betrayal, especially not when it came to classified property. Sudden jolt rocked the ship. Lissa flinched, her hand gripping the side of her seat so hard the metal creaked beneath her fingers. Cade steadied the controls, swearing under his breath. "Sorry," he muttered, glancing back. "She's old and stubborn, but she'll get us somewhere safe." Lissa didn't respond right away. She just stared at her hands, large, scarred, inhuman. Finally she spoke, her voice low. "You shouldn't have taken me. They'll hunt you too now." Cade leaned back in the pilot's seat, rubbing his temples. "Let them. You don't understand." Her voice trembled. "They branded me. I'm marked. My DNA, my tracker, all of it, if they find me. If they won't just take me back, they'll erase me." He turned slowly to look at her. "They won't get the chance." She studied him, confused by the certainty in his voice. "Why are you doing this?" Cade looked away for a moment, thinking. Then he said quietly, "Because I saw your eyes in that pod. You weren't crying because you were scared. You were crying because you believed you didn't deserve to be saved." That silenced her. He stood, stepping closer. She stiffened as he reached for the blanket, but he didn't remove it, just lifted her wrist gently, turning it to examine the faint burn near the pulse. Embedded in her skin was a small black brand, barely visible, but pulsing faintly. Cade frowned. "We have to get that out." "I know," she said. "But we can't do it in space." He nodded. "Then we find a place." They didn't have much time. Using backdoor codes from old missions, Cade plotted a course to a forgotten moon near the edge of Empire space. It was a dead zone, no patrols, no colonies, only ruins and rogue traders. If they were lucky, no one would look for them there. The ship rattled as it entered the atmosphere, skimming low over ice-covered cliffs and abandoned mining rigs. Cade found a hollowed-out shelter built into a mountainside and guided the freighter. Inside, it was dark, dusty, but intact. Enough to hide them for now. When the engines powered down, silence fell. Cade stood and stretched. But before he could speak, he noticed Lissa wasn't moving. She stood in the open ramp, staring at the sky snow, falling gently outside the hangar, painting everything in silver. Her large frame looked almost ghostly against the cold backdrop. Her arms were bare now. The blanket had slipped down, revealing her shoulders, her thick muscular back, the soft curves of her hips. But it wasn't beauty, he noticed. It was the way she stood, like she didn't belong. She turned slightly, her voice barely audible. "They called me defective, said I'd crush anything I tried to carry, said I'd make weak children, so they stopped trying." Cade stepped beside her, not touching her. "Yet you believed them." She hesitated, then nodded. Every word. He reached up and gently touched her shoulder. "Then it's time to believe something else." That night they found old supplies in the shelter. Cade worked by lamplight, fixing broken wiring, while Lissa sat by a small heater. Her eyes followed him as he moved. She still didn't understand him. No human had ever looked at her without fear or disgust, and yet this man treated her as if she was the one saving him. She watched his hands, rough, scarred, but steady. When he finally sat down across from her, offering half a ration bar, she took it with quiet gratitude. He looked at her wrist again. "We'll need to cut the tracker out." "Soon," she nodded. "There's someone, a rogue Gintech. He used to work for the labs. If we can find him, he might help." Cade leaned forward. "You trust him?" "No," she said. "But I trust that he hates them more than he fears me." For the first time since they met, Cade saw a flicker of fire in her eyes. Not pain, not shame, but a spark of something deeper. And he realized Something then. She wasn't just surviving. She was starting to fight back. They didn't speak much that night. When they lay down to rest in opposite sides of the shelter, Cade heard her whisper in the dark. "Thank you for not being afraid of me?" He didn't reply out loud, just smiled quietly into the dark. He wasn't afraid. He was already falling. Asterisk. The moons above the trade outpost glowed red and low, like watchful eyes peering through the smog. Cade kept his hood low as he walked through the crooked alleys, the smell of burnt oil and old metal thick in the air. Lissa followed silently. Behind him, cloaked head to toe. Even hunched, she stood half a head taller than most species here. This place was known as Vorn's Enda. Decaying mining hub turned black market zone where traders, outlaws, and broken machines went to disappear. No Empire patrols dared step foot on this moon anymore, which made it perfect for now. Cade glanced behind. Lissa's glow was hidden under layers of synthetic cloth, but he could still feel her tension. Every movement, every passerby made her flinch. She had been made to feel ashamed of her body for so long that even here where mutants and half-grown clones walked free, she felt like an outcast. She tugged her cloak tighter. "Are you sure this is safe?" She whispered. "No," Cade replied honestly. "But it's safer than staying still." They passed a stall where a lizard-headed vendor was screaming about cybernetic teeth. A group of gamblers laughed at a hologram of a dancing bot. Further down, a one-eyed child stared up at Lissa with curiosity, not fear. Lissa slowed as they passed him. He reached out with tiny fingers, brushing her cloak. "You're warm," he said simply. She blinked, before she could answer. The boy's mother called him, pulling him away with a muttered warning. "Don't touch ones like her." Lissa's head dropped again. Cade cursed under his breath. They kept walking until they reached a narrow staircase behind a junk stall. Cade knocked on the steel door at the top. 3 short, 1 long dot. It opened with a hiss, and a skinny man in a stained lab coat appeared. His eyes, one organic, one glass narrowed. At Cade, then slid to Lissa, his expression twisted. Well, he muttered. "Didn't think I'd ever see that model walk free." Cade stepped forward. "You're Dravik, right? Ex-geneticist? You worked with the labs?" "Worked for them, technically. Until they tried to sterilize me after I let one of your kind." "Go," he nodded. Toward Lissa. "Now I fix scrap parts and broken people." "What do you want?" "She's tagged," Cade said. "We need it out." Dravik crossed his arms. "She's not just tagged. That's a Phase 9 bio brand. Cut it wrong, and it sets off a neural burn." Lissa finally spoke, voice soft but firm. "Can you do it or not?" He studied her for a long moment. "You're not like the others," he said. "They cried when they begged me. You're angry." "I've had a long time to learn," she replied. Dravik shrugged and stepped aside. "Come in then. Let's see how deep the chains go." The room inside was filled with broken medpods and illegal scanners. Lissa sat on a repurposed bench, while Dravik powered up a crude biocutter. Cade stood by her side, never letting go of her hand. She didn't show pain when the blade cut near her wrist, only clenched her jaw. "You should have been their best," Dravik muttered as he worked. "Built stronger, engineered cleaner, but you scared them. Not just your body, your spirit. They couldn't program that out." Lissa said nothing, but her hand tightened around Cade's. It took 2 hours to finish. When the brand was finally removed, Dravik dropped it into a flame jar. The metal sparked, hissed, and melted into nothing. "Clean now," he said, "but not invisible. Someone sold your genetic data months ago. The Empire's dogs know what to smell for." Cade cursed again. "How long before they find us?" Dravik glanced at the door. "If you're lucky. A week." They left at dawn. The outpost was still half asleep, its lights flickering like dying stars. Cade led them to an abandoned tower overlooking the cliffs, hoping for one quiet night before they moved again. Lissa stood by the edge, arms crossed, eyes on the horizon. The wind played with the edges of her cloak. Cade joined her, silent. After a long pause, she said, "That child." He said I was warm. "He was right," Cade said. "I didn't feel it," she whispered. Not until recently. I thought. Warmth was something I wasn't made to have. Or give. He looked at her, and now. She turned to him slowly, her expression soft but uncertain. I wonder if I could have a child of my own someday. His heart skipped before he could. Answer, she looked away. The labs said I was too big. My frame would crush anything I tried to carry. My hormones were labeled abnormal. They said I'd birth monsters or nothing at all. He stepped closer, placing a hand on her back. They lied. She looked at him again. Her eyes shimmered under the morning light. You think I could be a mother? He didn't hesitate. I think you already are. The wind quieted. The world held still. In that moment. Lissa wasn't a failed project or a genetic experiment. She was a woman flawed, powerful, uncertain, and standing at the edge of a life she never thought she'd deserve, and Cade knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going anywhere. Asterisk snow drifted softly outside the rusted window of the mountaintop shelter, the flakes swirling like lost stars in the night. A cracked heater hummed weakly in the corner, giving off just enough warmth to keep the bitter cold from biting through their skin. Cade sat near the table, working silently, soldering parts from old medkits and scanning tools. Lissa watched. From the corner of the room, a thick blanket draped around her broad shoulders. It had been 3 days since. Dravik removed the brand. 3 days of silence, of waiting, of watching shadows move where there should be none. Cade didn't trust. Silence. Silence was what came before hell opened its mouth, and Lissa felt it too. Her body was recovering physically. She was strong, but inside she was torn. Her thoughts wandered into places she had buried long ago. The genetic scans, the laboratory, lights, the whispers of scientists behind glass walls saying things like unfit, non-viable scrap unit. She had grown up hearing she was defective, not just in body, but in soul. Now, for the first time in her life, she had something dangerous hope, and it scared her more than anything. She stood suddenly. I want to know, she said. Cade looked up. Know what? If it's true? If I can have children? If I'm really broken? Or if they just told me I was so? I'd give up. He blinked. You don't have to prove anything? Yes. I do, she said sharply. Then softer. Not to them. To myself. Cade set down the soldering iron. How? There's a facility to sectors from here. Off-grid. Used to be a birthing lab before the Empire shut it down. Some of the old scanners are still working. If we can get in, I can run a full scan. Quiet. Alone. Cade hesitated. That's not exactly a tourist spot. It's abandoned. Or crawling with scavengers or traps. She stepped closer. Please. There was something in her voice that stopped his arguments cold. Not desperation. Not pain. Conviction. She had to know. So he nodded. They traveled under a false ID beacon, using a hidden path through a nebula that fried most sensors. The journey was long, the silence between them heavy but not uncomfortable. When they arrived, the planet below looked dead gray surface, cracked soil, broken skies. But under the surface lay the facility, a large underground base built into a canyon wall. Once funded by the Empire's prenatal division, Cade powered down the ship and scanned for heat signatures. No movement could be safe. They entered. Through a collapsed docking bay, squeezing through twisted metal and shattered glass, dust coated everything. Old examination pods lay open, wires like vines spilling across the floor. Faded posters still hung on the walls, showing artificial mothers smiling with impossible perfection. Lissa stared at one long and hard. That's what they wanted us to be, she said quietly. Smiling, glowing, obedient, not real. Cade reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. They found a working scan pod near the back. Somehow, the battery backup still functioned. Cade helped her into the reclined seat, brushing her hair away from her face gently. You okay? She nodded, though her hands were clenched. He activated the scan and stepped back, watching the screen flicker to life. The hum of the machine echoed in the room. It was a slow process. Lissa closed her eyes. for the first time in her life. No one else was scanning her, not scientists, not technicians. Just her and a machine that didn't lie. After several long minutes, the results appeared. The pod clicked softly. Cade leaned in, reading. His mouth fell open slightly. Then slowly he turned to her. "Well?" she asked, afraid to look. "You can," he said, voice low with awe. "You're not broken. Your system's strong, different, but capable. They lied to you." Breath hitched. She sat up slowly. Staring at the screen, lines of data scrolled by, confirming everything he said. Her heart pounded in her chest. For years she had carried the belief that she was nothing more than a failed design. Now it felt like a dam had cracked inside her. Then dash, boom. The floor shook violently. Cade was on his feet in a second. Gun in hand, another blast echoed dust. Rain down from the ceiling. "Someone's here?" he said. Lissa stood towering, the blanket falling away to reveal her full form. Her muscles tensed. Her jaw locked. "How?" she growled. "They must have traced the beacon when we powered the pod." A red light flashed in the hallway. Cade grabbed her wrist. "Run." They raced through the corridors as footsteps and metal boots echoed behind them. Black armored agents, Sempire bounty units. More than a dozen. Cade opened fire, taking down the front line. "Keep going." Melissa stopped. Her eyes burned. "They want me," she said. "And then they'll get me." No, before he could stop her. She turned and ran toward the attackers. Not away, roaring. She moved like a storm, too. Agents fired stun rounds at her chest. She didn't even flinch. She picked one up and threw him into the wall, then used a broken pipe to shatter another's mask. Cade stood frozen for a split second. He had never seen anyone move like that, like someone who had decided they would never be owned again. When it was over, 5 agents lay groaning on the floor, 2 unconscious, and the rest had fled in terror. Lissa was panting, blood on her hands, her eyes wild. Cade approached slowly. She turned, trembling. "Did I hurt you?" she asked. He stepped into her arms. Held her tight. "No," he whispered. "She saved me."
What?
And as she pressed her forehead to his for the first time, she believed it. Asterisk, the wind screamed across the icy cliffs as the stolen transport descended, smoke trailing from one of its side thrusters. Cade gripped the controls, his knuckles white, jaw clenched. The ship wasn't going to hold much longer. They'd barely escaped the facility. Lissa had held off a team of elite bounty hunters with nothing but rage and broken metal, and now they were paying the price. He glanced over at her. She sat beside him, bruised and bloodied, one arm pressed tight against her ribs. Her body was built to endure, but even she had limits. Still, she didn't complain. She just sat there, silent, her eyes locked on the view ahead. And Cade could see it. She wasn't thinking about the pain. She was thinking about what the scanner had shown her. She could have children. She could carry life. She was whole. The truth was still settling inside her like warm fire, trying to push out years of frost and doubt. The ship landed hard on the frozen plateau, scraping across the snow and slamming into a jagged ice ridge before finally grinding to a stop. Sparks burst from the control panel. Cade exhaled shakily. "We're down," he said. Lissa opened the hatch without a word. Her breath steamed in the freezing air as she stepped outside, the blanket from earlier long gone. The cold bit into her exposed arms. She didn't flinch. She welcomed it. They were somewhere in the northern region of Gorisamun, known for its winter storms and hidden, resistant shelters. Cade had once helped establish a fallback camp here years ago, during one of the Empire's early purges. If it was still active, it might be their only shot at surviving. "We have to move," he said, slinging his pack over his shoulder. Lissa nodded, limping slightly as they made their way through the deep snow, the wreckage of their ship slowly disappearing behind them. By the time they reached the shelter, night had fallen. The entrance was carved into a mountain wall, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. Cade tapped a hidden panel, and the thick steel door opened with a groan. Inside, warm yellow lights flickered on. "Hello?" Cade called silence, then footsteps echoed down the hall. A group of figures emerged. "Hurry," older than Cade remembered. At the front stood a woman with one mechanical arm and a long scar down her face. She narrowed her eyes at him. "Cade?" He nodded. "Long time." She looked past him at Lissa and tensed. "That with you?" "She's the reason I'm alive." They let them in. The shelter was crude but functional, fire-heated chambers, clean water, old med supplies. Cade helped Lissa to a padded bench and started patching her wounds. She winced once but didn't pull away. Across the room, the resistance fighters whispered, "She's one of them. Look at her size. Empire built. You can see the marks. She's dangerous." Lissa heard every word. She always did. Later that night, Cade tried to get her to rest, but she sat apart from the others, staring into the flames of a small heater. He joined her, handing her a warm drink. "They're afraid of me," she said softly. "They don't know you. They don't need to." "My body says everything." "No," Cade said. "Your body tells the truth. That you survived what broke hundreds. That you fought them with your hands, not just your heart. That you're powerful enough to carry life and strong enough to protect it." She looked at him. His voice lowered. "When I see you, I don't see a mistake. I see the future." She didn't speak, just reached for his hand. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then an explosion. The entire shelter shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The lights flickered. Cade was up in a second, drawing his weapon. "Stay here." Lissa stood with him. "Not a chance." They raced into the corridor. Outside, the security cameras showed armored intruders, Empire hunters. Fast-moving, scanning for life signs. "They must have tracked the ship," Cade said. "They found us." Inside, the resistance scrambled. Blasters were handed out. Walls were sealed. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. Cade turned to Lissa. "We hold them off at the front by the others' time to escape through the tunnel." "You mean I hold them?" she said, her voice calm. "You're not fast enough?" "I'm not leaving you behind." She gave him a small smile. "You're not. You're going to live. You'll help them rebuild. Teach them how to fight. I'm going to make sure you get that chance." She didn't wait for his reply. She grabbed a heavy shield from the wall too, large for any normal fighter to carry, and walked straight to the front gate. When the door exploded inward, she met the first wave head-on. She didn't use a gun. She didn't need one. She fought with her bare hands, her body a living weapon. She struck like lightning, fast and brutal, sending armored men crashing into the walls. The Empire had trained her to be strong, but they had forgotten what true strength was. Strength was choosing to protect others. Strength was standing your ground when no one else could. Strength was her. Cade watched from the hallway. Awe and fear tangled in his chest. She was bleeding. She was exhausted, but she never stepped back. And when the last soldier fell, the silence that followed was deafening. She stood in the center of the wreckage, chest heaving, hair wild, surrounded by the broken remnants of the Empire's elite. Then she looked up at Cade, and finally, she collapsed. Asterisk darkness swam at the edges of Cade's vision as he ran. Lissa's massive form hung limp in his arms. Her head against his shoulder, blood soaking into the fabric of his jacket. The smell of ash and burnt electronics clung to the collapsing tunnel walls around them. Behind him, the underground shelter smoldered, the fires of battle still glowing dim through the dust. The others had fled through the secondary tunnel. He had stayed behind for her. She had saved them all. Now it was Cade's turn to save her. He stumbled through the narrow exit shaft, muscles screaming from the weight. Lissa was heavier than any human, her dense musculature far beyond normal biology, but he didn't care. He didn't stop. Not when the emergency shuttle blinked green on his tracker. Not when the cold wind of the surface hit him in the face. Not even when the pain in his side told him something inside might be broken. He laid her gently in the shuttle's padded seat and slammed the hatch shut. "Stay with me," he said, brushing a blood-matted strand of hair from her face. "Just a little longer." She stirred. "Cade," she whispered, barely audible. "I'm here." Her lips twitched into the ghost of a smile before her eyes slid closed again. He took off. The shuttle's engines roaring as they lifted into the storm-filled sky. Snow swirled around them like ghosts. Cade didn't look back. They arrived at a small outpost hidden deep within a canyon on the uncharted moon of Telluriza. Rogue station used only by smugglers and those who didn't want to be found. The medic there was gruff, old, and half-cybernetic, but skilled. He didn't ask questions. "She's built tough," the medic muttered, wiping his hands. "I've never seen muscle layers like this. Healing rate slow, but steady. The scans say she should have died from blood loss. She didn't." Cade sat beside her for hours. He held her hand even when it stayed limp in his. He watched her chest rise and fall, grateful for every breath, in the quiet. Memories replayed in his mind, her strength, her pain, her fire. The way she had stepped in front of blaster fire without hesitation. The way she looked at him when she thought she wasn't worthy of being loved. He leaned down and whispered, "I didn't save you because you were strong. I saved you because I needed you to save me too." She didn't answer, but her hand twitched in his. 3 days later, she woke. The light above her flickered. Her vision was blurry. The first thing she saw was Cade, asleep in the chair beside her, face lined with exhaustion, one arm in a sling. She tried to speak, stirred. "Hey," he said, blinking quickly. "You're awake," she smiled weakly. "You look like hell. Should see the other guy." She chuckled, then winced. "Everything hurts. You almost died, I know." Silence hung between them. Then she asked, "Did we save them?" Cade nodded. "Every one of them. They're gone now, scattered to safe zones. The Empire won't find them." She exhaled deeply, relief washing over her, and then she looked at him, really looked at him. Something had changed. There was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before, something beyond survival, beyond gratitude. He sat forward. "While you were unconscious, a message came through. Empire issued a bounty. Not just on you now, on me too. High value. They know I helped you." Her face fell. "I'm sorry. I'm not." "Cade, you had a future. A name. You were a soldier." "I was a dog," he said, voice firm, "chained to a system that breaks anything it doesn't understand. I didn't lose anything. I found something." She blinked. "What?" He leaned forward, hand brushing hers. "You," she swallowed. "Cade." But he wasn't finished. "There's more. That Gintech Dravik. He sent me your medical scans. Before the attack, they're complete. Not just fertility readings. He did a full compatibility match between your DNA and human strands." She froze. "Why?" "To know the risk. If you and I ever—" Her eyes widened. "You asked him?" He nodded. "I had to know, before I told you what I want." Her voice trembled. "What did it say?" Took a breath. "It's possible. You and I, if we chose to, could have a child. It would be hard. Painful, but not impossible. The child would be unique, but alive. Real. Ours." She couldn't speak. Her whole body trembled. "You don't have to decide now," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know. I know what they told you. But they were wrong. You're not unfit. You're not broken. You're capable of love, of life, and I love you." The words hung in the air like a sunrise breaking over cold mountains. She reached up slowly, her hand on his cheek. "You'd want a child?" "With me?" she whispered. "With no one else?" A tear rolled down her cheek. She nodded, and in the silence her voice was steady. "Then let's make our own kind of future, one they'll never control." Outside a storm passed, and light touched. The land for the first time in days, inside. Something stronger than war had begun. A promise. Asterisk, the sun rose slowly over the green hills of Irosa. Colony moon far from any Empire-controlled sector. It touched the tall grass with golden fingers, warming the wooden home nestled between two hills. Smoke curled gently from the chimney. Birds not engineered but real and wild fluttered across the sky in soft arcs. Inside the home, Lissa stood, barefoot by the kitchen window, one hand resting on the smooth curve of her belly. Her other hand held a warm mug of herbal tea. The light glinted across her skin, now healed of the scars and burns she had carried for so long. Her stomach was full and round, and every day she felt life stir inside, her gentle flutters at first, then strong kicks. She had memorized every heartbeat. She smiled softly, the woman who once thought she couldn't bear life, who had been told she was too big, too wrong. So Broken was now carrying a child. Their child. Behind her, the creak of floorboards told. Her Cade was awake. He walked up behind her, still in his sleep shirt, his arm wrapping gently around her waist. He leaned his head against her shoulder, and for a long moment they just stood there, breathing together, watching the sunrise. She's moving, Lissa whispered. Cade chuckled. Again, she's going to break out early. Lissa laughed. A deep and warm sound that still surprised her sometimes. Like her father, she teased. Always in a hurry. Stubborn like her mother, he countered with a grin. Strong, too. She placed his hand over the movement. They stood there in silence, connected by more than just skin, by everything they had endured to reach this moment. Later, after breakfast, they walked out to the small garden Cade had planted. The soil here was rich, and the people kind. Local settlers didn't ask questions about where they came from or why she was so tall or how she glowed faintly at night. They only smiled and welcomed them in, just as they were. Lissa lowered herself slowly onto the bench under the shade tree, her movements careful. Her body had adjusted to the strain, but she still tired easily. The doctors had warned them her bones were built for strength, not softness. Carrying a child would test everything she had, but she didn't care. Every ache, every sleepless night, every dizzy spell, which is a miracle she embraced with all her heart. You remember what you told me back on the wrecked freighter? She asked suddenly. Cade looked up from where he was tending to the soil. What part? He looked at me and said, Who told you that lie? He smiled, setting down the trowel. I meant it, she nodded. I believed it then. Now I know it was a lie. Her eyes filled with quiet fire. I was never too big to breed. I was just too much for them to understand. Cade stood and walked over to her. You were always more than they deserved. She reached up, cupping his face. You gave me more than freedom. You gave me a future, a home, a family. And you gave me a reason, he said. They kissed soft. And sure, not out of desperation, but devotion. Time passed, and the seasons turned. When the child came, it was in the dead of night, during a summer storm. The local midwife, a gentle elder with 6 arms and kind eyes, stayed by Lissa's side, murmuring encouragement in her own language. Cade never left the room. The pain was unimaginable, more than Lissa had ever known. But she faced it like everything else she'd ever fought. Head on, fire and will. And when the child was placed in her arms, wrapped in soft cloth, something inside her cracked open, not in pain. In joy, the baby was small but healthy, her skin a delicate shade between human and alien, her eyes glowing faintly blue. Her fingers curled around Lissa's thumb with strength that made the mother laugh and cry all at once. Cade sat beside her, speechless. Lissa whispered, She's real. She's perfect, Cade said. They named her Inari, an old word meaning born of freedom. Years passed, Inari grew fast, stronger than most, just like her mother, but gentle, curious, and endlessly kind like her father. The villagers adored her. She chased butterflies through the fields, helped old farmers carry tools, sometimes asked questions that made the stars seem closer. One night, Lissa sat with her daughter by the fire, brushing her long hair. Mama? Inari asked. Yes. Am I different? Lissa smiled. Because we chose to be. Didn't let them decide who we were. Will they ever come back? Lissa's smile faded, but her voice stayed calm. Maybe, but if they do, we won't run. Why? Because the strongest thing in this world isn't a weapon or an army, she said. It's a mother who chooses to protect her child, and I'll never let them take you. Inari nodded, and Papa. Lissa looked over to where Cade sat cleaning tools. He already fought the galaxy for me, she said. He'll do it again for you. And so, on that quiet moon, under a sky of infinite stars, a once broken woman who had been cast aside built a life with the man who saw her worth not as a weapon, not as a mistake, but as a woman capable of love, strength, and life, and in the soft hum of their home, with laughter echoing through the halls and hope carried in every heartbeat. Lissa finally understood. She had never been too big to be loved. She'd only needed someone big enough to hold. Her heart. Asterisk.